Hey everyone, David here, and welcome to Play It or Station It. These fucking names, but I like it, okay? I like it very much. And this is very similar to my other series, Game Pass or Pass the Game. And in that similar vein, it's going to be pretty much the same style of review, short format, very quick, off the cuff, for some of the newest releases, only instead of being centered around Xbox exclusives, it's going to be on those of PlayStation. And I feel like a very inaugural game, or rather expansion, to really talk about and kind of get this series up and running is for the intermission DLC for Final Fantasy VII Remake, also known as the Yuffie episode, that was released recently exclusively for the PlayStation 5. And trust me, that kind of sucks because we all know that PS5s are a dime a dozen, which is why virtually no one's really got them right now. So apologies if you haven't been able to really know exactly how this Yuffie episode plays out, since it is exclusive to the PlayStation 5 version of FF7 Remake. And it was released on June 10th, so it's been a couple of weeks, and I know that for those who want to play it have already played it, and for those that just kind of want to get a gist of what it's all about and how it kind of affects the grand overall scheme of this new FF7 Remake, some people may or may not have caught up with those pivotal plot points. So to kind of avoid those, for those who do want to keep things sacred up until they play it when they get their PS5, no footage of like the latter half of the game or the expansion is going to be used in this video. So don't worry, most of the footage you're going to be seeing here is from like the first 2 or 3 hours of the game, except for one section, and I kept it very, very vague as far as what you can see, only because it does a good job of illustrating the visual representation of the game. So other than that little moment, there's not going to be much from the latter portion of this game, so you're safe there. And you take control of Yuffie as she naively kind of navigates Midgar, arriving looking for a new form of materia that Shinra is developing, and her trying to not only crack this case, expose Shinra, but also take them down and make sure that she is able to extract the materia from them before leaving Midgar and before things can really go down. That will then tie into the events of FF7 Remake. And trust me, tie-in does it really, because right from the get-go, not gonna go into too many specifics, but the story does start to kind of intertwine with what's going on in the background and in the foreground of FF7 Remake, from inclusion of some of the central characters that you already kind of know and for the most part love, as well as one thing here or there that I even wasn't expecting, only for the game to then be like, yeah, we're not going to completely not acknowledge that this other more really grand scheme sort of plan is kind of infesting itself within Midgar and within the grand universe of FF7, or at least this version of Final Fantasy VII. And despite Yuffie's slight naivete to what's going on, she is an endearing character. Granted, sometimes she lays it a little too thick for my personal preference, a little towards the beginning, where she's a little just too happy to like, yes, I want you, I want this, let's do this, this, and that, and all the very, like I said, naivete that she just kind of oozes. Thankfully, you have other characters here, specifically Sonon, to kind of bring her down to a sense of reality while trying to undergo this mission of infiltrating Shinra. You know, this other character, Sonon, is truly the one that I resonated with the most, because he's the everyday man. He's the one that has to go on this mission with Yuffie, but knows that there's different things that they need to look at from a different perspective, so to make sure that they don't end up getting killed or sabotaging the mission. And that's why it was a little bit of a bummer that you really just play as Yuffie and not as Sonon, even within gameplay. This is not a spoiler. They made this a big point to talk about prior to the release of Intermission. And even though I knew about it, I was kind of hoping for there to be some kind of surprise or some elements or twist to this angle, and there really wasn't. You really just play as Yuffie and nobody else. You can give commands, and there is a new layer on the gameplay that I would love to see be brought back in a future installment or another piece of DLC, because once they integrated it, has to put it there, into this DLC, it's going to be very tough to follow up without it, especially if you have more and more characters to play as, and especially if we jump back into our beloved team of Cloud, Barrett, Aerith, and other company present. that could then kind of make the gameplay even deeper. And that's another big hook that really made me enjoy Intermission a whole lot more, was that gameplay, that very fast action paced, really quick and deadly gameplay from the original FF7 with Cloud and again his whole team is brought back once again here. Only there's a couple of elements. One, because it's Yuffie that we're talking about, she's got a whole new playstyle that really fits to her, because it's one thing that she can go in very quickly with her melee attacks and her kicks and punches, and of course her utilization of her shuriken, but she's able to then throw that shuriken and either use it as a projectile or kind of fuse it with her ninjutsu attacks that really made the gameplay and her combat flow much differently than that of Tifa or Barrett's or anything like that. She felt like her own brand new character, and it was very tough to really put her down after the game ended and the credits rolled. It's like, wow, I would legitimately not mind playing through this DLC again solely for her gameplay, and the way that she's able to then form a form of connection between her and Sonon from a gameplay and combat standpoint is really thought-provoking, especially when you bring up the menus and learn how to use certain attacks, but in a different style than you were led on to believe. And being that Intermission is exclusive to the PS5, you best believe that those visuals better be using as much of that PS5's power as it can. And man, this game is just like the original core game, gorgeous. But on top of that, it's able to retain the 60 frames per second while incorporating some elements of ray tracing. And if you want to beef up the game even more to a higher native 4K resolution or better textures, you have the option to switch between performance mode or fidelity mode. And either way, you can't go wrong. Personally, because this was my first kind of dip back into the world of Midgar and FF7 Remake, I wanted to then do the 60 frames per second because it is running exclusively on the PS5. So this game brings back the visuals, brings back the audio, great voice work from everybody involved, as well as the awesome, beautiful score is reimagined here once again, not only for a specific theme for Yuffie, but everybody else involved, including Sonon. Granted, much like the core game, the critiques that I had with that game start to kind of bleed here, particularly with some of the dialogue, and then, of course, the convoluted storytelling. That does make way for some really good theory conversation, especially with a very, very off-kilter ending. I mean, I'm not saying that this is a bad ending, but this was just completely unprecedented. I'm obviously not going to go into spoilers for those who had not played it, but this was just not expected for the Yuffie episode to end. That's what I'll leave it at, is that for a DLC that is titled after Yuffie and centered around Yuffie, it wasn't exactly the sort of ending that I was expecting, because Square Enix and the whole team behind this remake is really doubling down and making sure that you're set up for something that you cannot possibly really theorize and, you know, kind of pick apart going from this point forward. I can at least say that if you loved the combat and the fluidity of that original core Final Fantasy VII remake, as well as the beautiful visuals and awesome dynamic score, then the Yuffie episode is a must not miss. I definitely say play it, especially since one critique that I had with the original game is not necessarily found here, because even though the DLC, it gives you your money's worth by logging in around probably about 6.5 hours, which is the amount of time that it took me to beat, I for one did not find too much padding or any kind of filler like the original game actually had. So I would probably say it's a much tighter package than that core game, at least from a DLC perspective. Besides that though, definitely recommend it if you were a fan of the FF7 remake. If you have already played it, however, let me know in the comments what you guys thought. Please keep it spoiler free, because like I said, I know we're all chomping at the bit to really dissect and talk about what exactly happened there at the very, very end, because I, for one, still don't know what the hell I just witnessed. Thank you guys for watching. Like and share. Subscribe if you guys want to see more. Make sure to check out the links in the description for the Twitch channel, the Patreon, and other social media platforms. And as always, stay healthy and stay humble.